Bon appetit and welcome to the Off Menu podcast with Ed Gamble and James Acaster. Bon appetitio and welcome to the Off Menu podcast with Ed Gamble and James Acaster.
Hello and welcome to Off Menu with me, Ed Gamble, and who's that over there? The Jingle Bells Boxing Day Off Menu podcast. Hello. Welcome to the Off Menu podcast, and may I be the first to say Happy New Year. Welcome to the Off Menu podcast, the podcast that sounds so tasty you could eat it. Welcome to the Off Menu podcast. I really wish you'd stop doing that. Oh no. It's the Off Menu podcast. Tuck your napkin into your collar because it's time for the Off Menu podcast. Hello and welcome to the Off Menu podcast. The podcast that is food. Get that cutlery ready. It's time for the Off Menu podcast. Bon appetitio and
yeah.
Welcome to the Off Menu podcast. It's the Off Menu podcast. 2 spoons with the podcast, please. We'll be splitting this one. Hello and welcome to the Off Menu podcast. Did someone order a podcast? Well, here is one of the podcasts that you've ordered. It's the Off Menu podcast. Ding-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling. That's the dinner bell. Welcome to the Off Menu podcast. Oh,
boy.
Is that some tummies rumbling that I hear? Your order's ready. Your order's ready. It's another Off Menu podcast. Put us on a medium heat for 1 hour approximately. You got yourself a hot podcast. Well, pull up a chair and tuck your napkin into your collar. It's the Off Menu podcast. Welcome to the Off Menu podcast. I don't mind carving. The podcast's ready. Take it out of the oven and leave it to rest. Welcome to the Off Menu podcast. James, Ed, dinner's ready. Welcome to the Off Menu podcast. Have you washed your hands, young man? Because we're about to listen to the Off Menu podcast. What's that sizzle? Why, it's another hot podcast. Oh, is that your tummy rumbling I hear? Then it must be time for the Off Menu podcast. And if you just leave that in the fun oven for about half an hour and sprinkle over a little bit of love, you've got yourself an excellent podcast. Excuse me, could you bring me another spoon? This one's a little bit dirty. Welcome to the Off Menu podcast. I'm going to need oven gloves to touch that podcast. It's burning hot. Welcome to the Off Menu podcast. Could I just get the rest of this podcast to take away, please? Welcome to the Off Menu podcast. So we'll just take this podcast with 2 spoons to share, please. Welcome to the Off Menu podcast. Ding dong. Oh, the takeaway's here. What's it going to be? It's the Off Menu podcast. We'll be going Dutch on this one. Welcome to the Off Menu podcast. And if you cook the podcast just for 2 minutes on each side, you can make sure that the centre is really funny. Would you like black pepper with that, sir? No, thank you. It's the Off Menu podcast. On the menu? I don't think so. It's off menu. What's that sizzle? Is it a pan of bacon? No. It's the sizzling chat of the Off Menu podcast.
Welcome to the Off Menu podcast. If it's not delivered within 30 minutes or less, you get your money back. Welcome to the Off Menu podcast. If it was on a curry menu, it would have 3 chilies after it. Oh, I've just realised the podcast's still in the oven. It's perfect. Welcome to the Off Menu podcast. And then just at the last minute, you whack the heat right up and you are guaranteed a very crispy podcast. Welcome to the Off Menu podcast.
Crisp.
Does anyone here at the table have any allergies? Oh yes, I'm allergic to bad podcasts. Don't worry, that won't be a problem. Welcome to the Off Menu podcast. Oh no, I forgot about the podcast in the oven. I think it's burning. Oh, actually, no, it's fine. It's perfect.
Wonderful stuff.
Welcome to, I really went into character there. Oh, here we are again. Your tummies are rumbling. I can't think of an intro.
Oh, it's a sad day.
Well, we've not recorded one.
Finally, it happens.
I'll be honest, we've not recorded one in a while, and I forgot that part of my job was coming up with a natty intro. And then I remembered halfway through saying, here we are again, and I came up with our tummies are rumbling, which is real bad.
Yeah, you really tried to claw it back. I was like, what's going on here?
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
I know. And now I'm touching my face like a sort of stricken person.
Yep.